Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. It is my privilege to extend a heartfelt welcome on behalf of the Historical Society of Scottish Church College. On the auspicious day to commemorate 219th birth anniversary of Reverend Dr. Alexander Duff, I would like to welcome Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, our guest of honor, who will be delivering the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture, our principal, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondol, Vice Principal and President of the Society, Dr. Supratim Das, Vice President and Head of the Department, Dr. Debaduti Bandyopadhyay, and professors and students from other colleges and students of semester 2, 4 and 6 in the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture and the publication of the second issue of CLIO. Let us take a brief moment to look back at the first Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture. Let us take a brief moment to look back at the first Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture, delivered in 2023 by Professor Tapoti Go Thakurata, whose insightful exploration set the inaugural lecture to a remarkable precedent for this series, laying a solid foundation for future discussions that examine the interplay of history and intellectual inquiry. Today, as we gather for the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture, we continue this tradition and look forward to another engaging session that deepens our understanding of history. Before we proceed further with today's program, let us take a moment to a deeply saddening event which recently took place in the Pahalgaon, which claimed innocent lives and shook the nation's conscience. I request everyone present here to please rise and join us in observing 1 minute of silence in memory of those who lost their lives in this tragic incident. Thank you. Now I would like to invite our guest of honor, Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, our principal, our vice principal, IQAC, to kindly come up on the dais. To begin today's program, it is my honor to invite someone who continues to inspire and guide us with her commitment. I would now request our respected principal, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondol, to deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon. সবাইকে নমস্কার. Honorable Speaker of today's Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture, Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, former professor at the Center of Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Vice Principal of Scottish Church College, and the President of Historical Society of our college, Dr. Supratim Das, IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Samrat Bhattacharjee, Bursar, Dr. Upendranath Nandi, Senator Secretary, Dr. Bidisha Sinha, our Teachers Council Secretary, Dr. Indrani Kaur, Head of the Department of History, Professor Debaduti Banerjee, and all faculty members of history and other departments, former students of this prestigious department who are now the honorable members of Historical Society of Scottish Church College, beloved students who are attending this lecture, on behalf of Scottish Church College family, I welcome you all. We are indebted to Professor Chakravarti as he has given consent to come to our college to share his views on the early medieval in Deccan and South India, an overview. We are grateful to you, sir. Today, the Historical Society in collaboration with the Department of History, is going to publish the second issue of e-magazine CLIO, the SCC Chronicle. I would like to congratulate the entire team of CLIO. Students, you are really incredible. Thank you for your efforts. History department is in the process of keeping historical accounts of this present era for the future through these publications. The faculty members and the editorial team of CLIO deserves again a very big round of applause. I wish you all the best on the 219th birth anniversary of our founder, Reverend Dr. Alexander Duff. May God bless this institution and guide us in right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your thoughtful and encouraging words. Now we move on to a moment of honor and gratitude. As a mark of our appreciation, we would like to felicitate our distinguished guest for the day. I will request our principal, ma'am, to felicitate Ranabir Chakravarti. Ma'am will be assisted by Kusum Chobe of semester 6. We also have a special handcrafted gift for you, which has been made by our students in collaboration with Amar Kuti Society. Next, I have the honor of inviting someone who plays a pivotal role in shaping the academic and intellectual fabric of our college. I now request Vice Principal and President of the Society, Dr. Supratim Das, to share a few words with us.
A very good afternoon. Really, it's my great pleasure and privilege, and I feel so delighted to welcome our speaker today, Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, who I remember came to this college long back, and indirectly also who has a connection with this college because his mentors, Professor Brotindranath Mukhopadhyay and Professor Dilip Kumar Bishwas, both of them, they came here more than 2 times each, if I am not wrong. Ranabir, you are most cordially welcome. This is the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture organized by Scottish Church College Historical Society and also the Department of History. And I must add that in this college there are so many named lectures, and to my mind, this particular lecture, Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture, it is surely one of the best, one of the most privileged. Now, I already last year wrote something about Kalidas Nag's historical writings. So I will just take 5-6 minutes to add more. And though this is particularly for the students, why Kalidas Nag? Because he was actually the founder of the Historical Society. And for your information, there was a time, particularly in the first 2-3 decades of the 20th century, that this college, which was then known as Scottish Churches College, here there were at least 3-4 very active and very creative societies: Historical Society, Philosophical Society, Literary Society, English Society, Economics Society. And some of the luminaries of early 20th century who had been alumni here, they were very closely associated with these particular organs of the college. And Kalidas Nag, he was actually a student of history here in the first decade of the 20th century. And then from 1915 to 1919, he taught here in the Department of History. And from Kalidas Nag's diary, I came to know that he himself refers to it that he founded the Historical Society in 1915. At that time, he was very young in age, and he was the youngest teacher, the faculty member in the department. Now, a few words about Dr. Nag. Now, he was a renowned Indologist and a very well-known figure in European academia, as well as having worked with scholars of the likes of Silva Levi and Romarola. An ardent traveler, a regular traveler, Dr. Nag was willing to look for India in the far corners of the East and seek cultural linkages. His close connection with French academia earned him a nomination as an officer d'au academic by the government of France. In India also, he served as the member of the Rajya Sabha from 1952 to 1954. But what is most important and relevant here is that I would like to refer to the internationalism of Dr. Kalidas Nag as the associate of Rabindranath Tagore and also the co-founder of Greater India Society, about which I wrote last year. In the historiography on Indian interwar internationalism, Kalidas Nag remains, this is very unfortunate but true, a side character operating in the shadow of Rabindranath Tagore, and he elicited considerably less attention than his more famous contemporaries. One of them, absolutely his contemporary in this college, one is Subhash Chandra Bose and the other is M.N. Roy. Both of them inspired a voluminous literature. Kalidas Nag did not have the opportunity to have it. Yet, Dr. Nag was arguably one of the most widely traveled and well-connected Indian intellectuals of his generation. Now, moving with equal poise in international scholarly, orientalist and literary circles, Nag was, unlike M.N. Roy and Subhash Bose, not a political activist engaged in an all-out assault against the British Raj. Instead, he was a university personality and tireless institution builder who subtly attacked the Raj in the realm of knowledge by establishing rapport with scholars and writers across the globe. His dazzling and ever-expanding itinerary was quite literally unbound and covered all continents, steering clear of extreme political positions that would jeopardize his freedom of movement. Nag rather acted as a savvy go-between and used his considerable domestic and global network to organize the Greater India Society movement. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, the Greater India Society radically and lastingly reconfigured the narration of India's ancient past by spreading a popular awareness of its historical role as Asia's cultural and spiritual fount. So, although today almost a forgotten figure, a forgotten scholar, he played, as far as our college is concerned, a very pivotal role, because we must remember that when he was the founder president of Scottish Church College Historical Society, the secretary was none other than Niraj Chandra Chowdhury. And it was under his inspiration, and rather because of some kind of arrogance against his teacher, that Niraj Chowdhury wrote his first historical article, The Craft of History Writing. And this happened during a particular historical society incident. I am not going into that. It's nice that our students, they really took the trouble to revive historical society, and I'm grateful to our students. I congratulate my dear students. I congratulate all my dear colleagues of the department, and of course our authorities, that thanks to all of them, that the historical society, after a long period of interval, it was revived, and now I believe, strongly believe, it is in safe hands, and it is going really very well. So with these few words, I look forward to really hearing from Ranabir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would invite someone who has worked with dedication and vision to bring the second issue of CLIO, the magazine of the Historical Society. I welcome the editor-in-chief of CLIO, Obhisambudho Mukherjee, to address the gathering and share a few words about this edition and the journey behind its making.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. And thank you, Arunodaya, for your wonderful introduction. It gives me immense joy and pride to finally present to you the second edition, the second issue of CLIO, the SCC Chronicle. This issue is not just a publication. It is a reflection of the vibrant spirit of our institution and our deep engagement with the evolving world beyond the college gates. Rooted in a legacy that spans over a century and inspired by the revival of the Historical Society in 2022, CLIO's journey began in 2023 with the launch of its first issue. Since then, our editorial board has worked with tireless dedication not only to honor the legacy, but to preserve our rich traditions while also embracing new ideas and forward-thinking perspectives. This issue features a rich array of voices, especially like that of the essay of our president of the Historical Society, contributions from our esteemed alumni, our own students from the Department of History, and also from the contributors across some of the most renowned colleges in India, and especially Kolkata. One of the main highlights of this issue is an exclusive interview with Dr. Sanjay Manjul, who is the currently Joint Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, which offers a rare and insightful glimpse into the mind of one of India's most distinguished archaeologists. We have structured this issue into 6 main sections with room for further expansion or revision. Each section has its own flavor and significance. The reminiscence section, which pays heartfelt tribute to our historians we have recently lost, and which evoke cherished memories and honoring them for their immense contributions. The essay section, which includes contributions not only from our students of our college, but also from students of other colleges. Some pieces are, I must say that some pieces are truly exemplary in both their depth and originality. I would especially like to mention that of Snigdha Banerjee's essay on Ghore Baire, Baul Darshan by Bhumika Chakravarti, and Koina Boshak's exploration of the current Kuki-Meitei conflict. I wish I could delve more into each piece, but the time does not permit me. The tribute section seeks to recognize and reflect on the lives and works of pivotal historical figures like that of Michael Madhusudhan Dutta, James Friendship, Franz Kafka, Howard Carter, and Jonas Dash. a small way of keeping the legacy alive. We are also proud to introduce 3 new sections in this issue. Firstly, the Memoirs from Indian History, which explores themes that deserve deeper historical introspection or retrospection. Secondly, Frames, a visual journey through photographs and paintings that merges memory with creativity. And finally, our newly added film review section, where history meets cinema in thoughtful reflection. For the first time, we had opened our call of submissions to students to outside of our college, and the response was truly overwhelming. It was humbling and it was inspiring, affirming our belief that history remains a living and a breathing discipline. The issue stands as a testament to the academic and cultural synergy driving and thriving not only at Scottish Church College, but also across Kolkata's leading institutions. From global perspectives to personal reflections, every contribution in this in this issue offers an unique lens into the world where the past and the present coexist, shaping our future. I must take a moment to acknowledge the people who made this possible. My heartfelt thanks to Anushila Bor for her beautiful calligraphy, to Ornoday Haldar, our General Secretary. Your constant support, whether it be at 1 p.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning, has been my backbone throughout this journey. Thank you to Kusum Chaube, who has stayed with me late into the night after college and working tirelessly to see this edition through. I am equally grateful to Madhuma Shengupta, Purvasha Dash, Tonishta Malakar, and Shomik Bashu, whose insights and help with the layout and design gave this issue the aesthetic edge it needed. A special thanks to Dr. Shrimego Thakurta and Dr. Supratim Dash. Ma'am and sir, your technical guidance and steady encouragement kept us grounded and helped us moving forward. And of course to Ranabir sir, thank you for your patience and for tolerating me for my many emails, texts, and last-minute questions over the months. This magazine was born from a vision, an idea that began to take shape the moment the first issue was launched. From that spark to this tangible outcome, the journey has taken over 5 months, and today, holding this finished copy and the completed version, the feeling is surreal. It's a sense of fulfillment, of satisfaction, and a deep gratitude. To our professors and editorial board, thank you for bearing with me with the late edits and endless revisions and our constant discussions. To our contributors, especially from those from outside colleges, thank you for believing in this experiment and helping it succeed. While challenges and conflicts were not absent, they only served to strengthen my resolve, our resolve rather, and adaptability. Today, I stand here, humbled, proud, and incredibly grateful. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your support, encouragement, and belief in CLIO. Thank you.
Thank you for your words and for your tireless effort. Before proceeding further on, I would like to call upon the dais Dr. Kaberi Chatterjee, our editor of our college magazine. And please. And now we come to a much anticipated moment, the inauguration of the second issue of CLIO, the magazine of the Historical Society of Scottish Church College. I would request Oritrika Gupta and Koena Bakchi to give the copies to our esteemed guests on the dais. I would request to kindly unveil and inaugurate this new edition of CLIO. Sir, sir, ribbon take. Thank you. CLIO is not just a magazine, it is a reflection of our shared commitment to the historical inquiry, critical thoughts, and academic expression. We hope this issue continues to inspire and provoke thought among its readers. Now it is time to our attention to the highlight. An image. Yes, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. CLIO is not just a magazine, it is a reflection of our shared commitment to historical inquiry, critical thought, and academic expression. We hope this issue continues to inspire and provoke thought among its readers. Now it is time to turn our attention to the highlight of today's program, the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture. To introduce our distinguished speaker, I would like to invite Tunnishta Malakar to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ranabir Chakravarti specializes in the socio-economic history of early India, including the study of the pre-modern state society. He also has an enduring interest in the maritime history of the Indian Ocean during the pre-modern times up to circa 1500 CE. In addition to regularly contributing to the refereed field journals and edited academic volumes, he has authored and edited 14 books, including 3 in Bangla. Among his recent publications are History of Bangladesh, Early Bengal in Regional Perspectives up to circa 1200 CE, Trade and Traders in Early Indian Society, and The Pull Towards the Coast and Other Essays. The Indian Ocean History and the Subcontinent before 1500 CE. He provided annotations to the English translation by Giles Constable of a 14th century Latin crusade tract, How to Defeat the Saracens. Chakraborty was elected sectional president over the ancient Indian history by the Indian History Congress in 2011 Patiala session. He also presided over the ancient history section of the Punjab History Congress in 2011. He was awarded the Hemchandra Rai Chaudhuri Birth Centenary Memorial Gold Medal by the Asiatic Society, Calcutta in 2021. Thank you.
With that thoughtful introduction, it is my honor to invite our distinguished speaker, Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, to deliver the second Kalidas Nag Memorial Lecture on the topic, The Early Medieval in Deccan and South India.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm deeply overwhelmed by the wonderful invitation that came to me in the official letter from Dr. Mundal, the principal of this very famous, a landmark in the history of education in this country, of this state, and of course a landmark in the socio-cultural history till today, the very moment, Scottish Church College. I'm deeply thankful to Dr. Dash, Dr. Banerjee, and the lovely, the journal that has come out, and I congratulate the efforts of the students, all the teachers involved in the making of a particular journal that coincides the presentation of a lecture in the hallowed memory of one of the most important and towering intellectual figure of late 18th and late 19th and early 20th century, Dr. Kalidas Nag. I consider myself very fortunate. I'm deeply thankful to everyone in the college and for giving me an opportunity by your generous invitation to share some of my thoughts. This is the second, perhaps the third or the second time that I have stepped into this premise of this very famous institution of higher learning. And I know, at least by my a little bit of reading about the glories of this institution, and what a wonderful coincidence that I today have stepped into the premise of this college when the the birth anniversary of the founder of the college, Alexander Duff, is being celebrated. And these were the visionaries not only for advancement of education, but I understand that from a very long time, the institution opened its door for co-education curriculum, which is a landmark in social, cultural, and education field, particularly in the backdrop of the early 20th century. And this is for me something very important as I started my teaching career in Vishwabharati, which from 1921 was a residential co-educational university. And why not the two names, Rabindranath Tagore and Kalidas Nag, are often their association, their sharing of very values and their ideologies, particularly Rabindranath's very sharp critique and stand against aggressive nationalism, making him one of the most important voices on internationalism and going beyond the borders of narrow national and aggressive national interest in the wake of two devastating world wars. And we know how Dr. Nag was also a cultural and educational ambassador for India, which he was fortunate to see getting the independence, which Rabindranath did not live up to see, the situation of a free and independent India. Today I have decided to speak on a subject which is essentially exploration by me to share with you. It's an incomplete understanding that there are two major aspects of the choice of these subjects. I have chosen the theme as the early medieval in the Deccan and South India. And the span is about 7 centuries. It's a broad overview. The point is, why have I done that? That I must clarify first. First, my deep interest in the history of peninsular India, that is the first impulse that I chose to speak on this subject, because I never feel comfortable at looking at the ethos of this subcontinent, South Asia, merely from the perspective of the North Indian plains, the typical Ganga Valley, which appears to have been clamped on us for a very long time as the matrix of understanding the ethos of this very complex, long-lasting civilization and culture of South Asia. Ganga Valley is important, no doubt, but the vast subcontinent is far more complex and far more diverse than to be clamped under the North Indian perspective, particularly the Ganga Valley perspective. And I think I may not be wrong by telling, if one takes a train journey from Howrah to Chennai, say Coromandel Express or by Chennai Mail, or there are many other trains. I used to travel by these two trains pretty regularly. Anything after you cross the station Bhubaneswar, everything the Bengali word become Madraji. So that is generated because of our overemphasized understanding of the subcontinent's long past and even the present, merely from the North Indian sort of overwhelming North Indian paradigm. I'll come to the situation of South India, both in terms of physical geography and, most important, historical geography. In other words, in what I'm going to present, there is nothing at all of a nation state. And nowadays, everything being considered from the point of view of a nation state is a major fallacy. As the period I'm talking about, nowhere in the world there was any nation state. So it's better to throw away that paradigm of a nation state for looking at the situation. The second is the label, a chronological label, early medieval, spanning from 600, 1300. Now this is, normally we speak of ancient India, spanning from the earliest possible times, even from the Paleolithic times, down to 1200, 1300 as ancient India, which is now, in the garb of ancient India, it's being fostered on the minds of Indians as Hindu India, Hindu period. Once again, what has been discarded in the 1950s is being pressed on by the peculiar understanding of Indian civilization. If there is no particular nation state, there is also, particularly for my period, nothing called Hindu. The term is an neologism. You don't come across the term Hindu. Anything in the sense of a belief system or even as a group of people residing in the land called Bharatavarsha or Hindustan, India, anything before 1600, nothing is there. I jokingly say, if someone had asked the great South Indian philosopher Shankaracharya, 8th century, we came from Kerala, if he was asked, what is Hinduism and what is Hindu, he would have been completely speechless. There is no answer. You don't find the term at all in any of the Sanskrit literature or Dravidian literature prior to 16th century. And the understanding of this 700 years is crucial. It's a period of transition from what may be called the early historical, which has its peak in what B.D. Chattopadhyay, one of my most favorite and important historians, who considers a level of classical. What I'm doing is a post-classical scenario. Moment we talk of the classical and post-classical gives an indication it's a sliding down from the high standard achievement of the classical, then sliding down. And the medieval is often bringing an aspect of darkness, gloom, particularly drawing upon European historiography of the earlier types. Now even in Europe, nobody thinks that medieval could have been dark. And now medieval is constantly being seen as dark. There is nothing of that kind. So it's a period of transition, post-classical, towards the medieval in Indian history. It can be labeled as post-Gupta, but the chronological level, early medieval, has gained considerable acceptance and currency, largely due to two very major historians. One, Professor R.S. Sharma. The second is B.D. Chattopadhyay. With him, of course, his very close compatriot, Hermann Kulke. The first two are no more, but Professor Kulke is still among us. It is a phase, if what we mean by Indian Indic culture, largely having an imprint of Brahmanism, what goes in popular parlance as Hinduism, even the English word Hinduism is first used by Raja Ram Mohan Rai in 1815 or 16. There is nothing of the word in this English language prior to that. Its imprint and basic points lie in what may be called Puranic belief systems. the seeds of what is perceived as Brahmanical belief systems with diverse sects, with a deep imprint of bhakti medium, sectarian devotional groups, actually lies in this time. One doesn't have to look for genesis of the ethos of the belief systems, the social structure, the nature of different regions. Most important point, the celebration of regions. It begins from this time. I'll ask you, I don't have much time, to read two perspective works. One, a relatively small presentation, about 10 pages, I forgot exactly the number, EPW in 2021, my very good but late lamented friend, Bhairavi Prasad Sahu of Delhi University, wrote a piece asking the roots of what we mean by present-day Indic Brahmanical cultures lie during this period of early medieval. And in more recent times, a relatively much young scholar, in fact, he was one of my students in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Manu Devadevan, has written a book called The Early Medieval Origins of India, telling thereby one doesn't have to always, seeking the root of Indian ethos, not always in Harappa or Vedic texts, but in what was happening in early medieval times. Even in the context of early medieval India, the lasting contributions of R.S. Sharma, D.N. Jha, D.D. Kosambi, as a paradigmatic shift in the study of Indian history, bringing in Marxist analytical tools, somehow still looked essentially at North Indian plains. I'm trying to take you away from that, and because without taking into account the considerable expanse of the peninsular part, Indian history will remain elusive to us, because there are certain features of the peninsular part that needs our attention. And I start with this, the map, where you find both that it's a peninsular part, the dividing geographical physical line should be the Vindhyas. That's why Trans-Vindhyan I've used the term. And parallel to the Vindhya runs the Narmada, which comes out of the Vindhyas. That's why actually Moikal range, that's why it's one of the names, Sanskrit names of the Narmada is Mekala Suta, the daughter of the Moikal range, the central Vindhyan area. They run more or less parallel. Already by the late first century CE, the anonymous author of the Greek text, Periplus Maris Erythrae, or in Greek, Periplastes Erythras Thalases, knew that, he said, after Barugaza Broch in Gujarat, which lies at the mouth of the river Narmada, close to the sea. Narmada is the only river that has the forming delta in the west coastal area here. Country after, that is to the south of that, he was talking about the entire coastline, is Dakhinabadis, obviously meaning Dakshinapatha. Dakshinapatha, by the very term, literally means a route towards the south. And interestingly, like Uttarapatha also meaning a particular route of communication, the route of communication towards the south gives the geographical designation of a particular segment, a fairly large segment of the land in Trans-Vindhyan India. According to the Natya Shastra of Bharata, the Dakshinatya Riti is observed from the Vindhyas in the north to up to Setubandha, the entire area. While even the anonymous author of the Greek text I just mentioned tended to differentiate what is Dakshinapatha from what he called the Limurice d'America, that is the Dravida country. Once again, the dividing line is to the south of the river Krishna. And the term Dakshinapatha, as a kind of a prologue to what I'm trying to do, is already known pretty well in the Deccan by the early centuries of the Common Era, particularly in the epigraphic records of the Satavahanas, the first powerful state in peninsular India. All major Satavahana rulers called themselves Dakshinapatapati, the Lord of the Deccan. Interestingly, the term Dakshinapatapati, beginning with Simuka Satavahana, the first ruler in even the late century BCE, is in this Maharashtra area, Nasik, Junnar, Bhaja, western part of Maharashtra. He called him Dakshinapatapati, while the greatest ruler of this dynasty, you know well, Gautamiputra Satakarni, who was ruling even occasionally to the north of the Narmada and from one coast to the other coast, fairly deep, almost up to the northern part of Karnataka, called himself Dakshinapatapati. So the term Dakshinapatha is not merely a geographical term, it's a geopolitical term, and the limits of Dakshinapatha would change according to the political fortune of the first important state society in the Deccan. It's a fluid term, Dakshinapatha. And then, to the south of the river Krishna, you come across the land Dravida Desha, what briefly figures in the late 1st century BC inscription of Kharavela Tramidadeha. And in the earliest known Tamil oral poems called Sangam literature, it is called a Tamilakam. Tamilakam is not merely present-day Tamil Nadu. Tamilakam means parts of southernmost fringes of Karnataka, Kerala, the areas of present-day entire Tamil Nadu area. This is Tamilakam. And it is from Tamilakam that the name gives the Dravida Desha. So, I would now talk a little bit into this map. This is a British period map, the whole of the Madras Presidency as it was called, and you will find here from also the other image that this is the area of the subcontinent that has access to the sea on both the flanks. And that gives it a very special character. North India is a landlocked area, save the outlet in the Bengal Delta. And that is why perhaps in all the Sanskrit treatises, there is a kind of thalassophobia. The sea is a space that pollutes and therefore to be avoided, right from Manu Samhita and all others. In the case of the Deccan and South India, the familiarity with the sea is much more pronounced than what you see in the North Indian experience. Regarding a little bit more on you will also see that there is an interesting difference in terms of the geographical features between the west coast and the east coast. The west coast, say starting from the Gujarat area, is broken with many indentations giving access to large number of creeks. You have the Thana Creek near Mumbai, Basin Creek near Mumbai, and then many other creeks, and then deep in the south, in Kerala, the very famous backwaters. There are only two major river deltas in the west coast. One, the Indus Delta, the other is the Narmada Delta. There is no other delta. On the east, the entire eastern seaboard, you can perhaps see right from here, the Bengal Delta, right up to the farthest of south, you have a number of very important riverine deltas. Starting with the Bengal Delta, the largest delta in the world, then the Mahanadi Delta, then the twin deltas in the Andhra area, Godavari and Krishna, and then further south down, the Pennar, particularly then the Kaveri Delta, very important for our discussion, followed by the delta of the Vaigai, then a little bit farther down, the delta of the river Tamraparni. If you take a train journey from Kolkata to Chennai, you will come across, you can cross several of these deltas, and you can really see the huge spread of the rivers close to the sea. Because the deltas, why I say this, another basic point, please, you may note, unlike what is present-day Mumbai, Chennai, or Marmagao, no port before the colonial regime was established stood exactly on the seashore. They were always slightly inland in the riverine. These are riverine ports, starting with Lothal, say Barugaza, Surat, or later Masulipattnam. Even Kolkata does not stand on the sea. It is slightly in the delta inland because there was no harbor structure prior to the British engineering skill. That does not mean that there were problems of seafaring. These were slightly inland with easy connectivity towards the sea, and the abundant availability of two basic ingredients of ships and boats before the coming of the European technology is the wooden plank, the basic material of the shipbuilding, tied with coconut coir. No use of iron nails. And both the raw materials are abundant in the subcontinent, particularly in the coastal areas. And the coast is there largely in the Deccan and South India rather than towards in the North Indian scenario. In terms of the discussion, I shall often talk about epigraphic materials rather than churning out Sanskrit passages. I am no scholar of the Dravidian or any South Indian language, and I shall occasionally speak of what may be called the prescriptive, normative category of treatises. I would rather look at the descriptive category of sources, and inscriptions are not merely for recording the eulogies of rulers, but inscriptions sometimes capture what one had experienced. There may be problems of handling epigraphic documentation, but I take the cue from one of the finest historians of South India, Noboru Karashima. Karashima considered one has to lend ear to the whispering of inscriptions and then tease out the meanings and importance, because inscriptions, rather than the texts, most of the Indic texts are extremely difficult to pinpoint in their chronology, authorship, the actual provenance. Inscriptions are free from that and often record what was happening. I know there are problems of eulogistic description prashastis of great rulers, but that too can be checked and found out. And inscriptions are not merely recording what was happening in the royal circles. So with these basic things, I would now come into the situation slightly before the beginning of the early medieval in South India. Prior to 5th century, 500 BCE, you may come across in the Sangam literature of the Cholas, of the Pandyas in Madurai area. The Cholas were traditionally associated with the Kaveri Valley and Kaveri Delta. The Cheras in Kerala, what is this area? This part, they are often in translation called kings, Arasan in Tamil. The term Raja need not be always translated straightforward as a king, because the contextual analysis will give us the clue, the differentiation between a king and the chieftain. Did the king have a regular army? Did the king exact taxes on a regular basis with a revenue machinery? Did the ruler have a number of officials to assist him? Or it is essentially a kinship-oriented society with a chief at the top? Prior to 500 CE, this area, not the Deccan, the far south, Dravida area, is largely, particularly in the light of the Sangam literature, was experiencing chieftaincy. What is happening after 600? And please keep in mind another geographical factor, the importance of the monsoons. Whoever is the finance minister of India, the most important finance minister is the monsoon in Indian situation. The entire economy, even in the globalized world, oriented towards the peasant and the agrarian production, is at the mercy of the monsoon. Similarly, the coastal scenario, allowing seafaring in the Indian Ocean from the two coasts of the subcontinent, is entirely dependent on the nearly predictable alterations of the monsoon winds. And this is continuous, almost the Brodelian character of the factor of invariance longue durée, till the coming of the steam navigation in the Indian Ocean. So, and this will once again have some importance in the case of South India, even for agrarian scenario, because unlike the North Indian plains, South India does not have a very heavy rainfall, particularly during the southwestern monsoon season, except in the case of Kerala and up to the coastal areas of Maharashtra. We all know what the monsoon can play havoc during in the month of July and August in Mumbai. But then, as it crosses the Sahyadri range, often you come across the dry area, often the rain shadow area. And therefore, and there is no river in the south, in the Transvindian India, with a glacial origin. So the entire rain water is a strategic asset for the cultivators and particularly for the political authority. I am looking often at my prism would be the discussion is on the state society. This is a expression coined by B.D. Chattopadhyay, not merely the state, but the state society, meaning a very complex society that requires a political organization like the state with sharp differentiation and an ideology to back the state apparatus. A relatively simpler society, often marked by the pastoralist groups, the forest dwellers, the hunting-gathering group, with less sharp differentiation. Particularly in those societies, there is little application of the Varnajati status or Varnajati ideology. In that society, the need for a state is almost nil. While the agrarian Varnajati oriented society with very sharp differentiation requires a political organ called the state. So the state society is the major prism through which I shall discuss the position. That's why I said from 500 C onwards, we see the emergence of the state society. As I said, please look at this. This is the archaeological site of Alaganakulam. In the deep south, one of the farthest areas in South India, where this is the river Baigai. It's a delta and now meets the Bay of Bengal. This is a port site, but sheltered from the sea. This is a typical feature. Just before the period of our discussion starts, we have wonderful description of the port of Kaveripattinam in two Tamil epics. Moment we talk of epics, only Ramayana and Mahabharata are coming to our understanding. The Tamil literature already had experienced full-fledged two epics, the Silappatikaram and the Manimikalai, by about 500, 600 CE. And the premier port of the Cholas, still the Cholas are not a monarchical power, partly chieftaincy, partly towards a settled society, is Kaveripattinam. The word Pattinam means a port. In Sanskrit, the word is Velakula. In Tamil, it's the port Pattanam, Pattinam. This is the excavation, particularly after the tsunami, that brings out some structures, possibly a wharf or a jetty, once again located at the delta of the Kaveri, very close to the sea, but not exactly on the sea. Now, this is already familiar to you. You have given the wonderful poster. This is from Mahabalipuram, Mamallapuram, the premier port area of the Pallavas. Now you have a full-fledged dynasty in the South Indian scenario. Its rival, as you know, are the Chalukyas of Badami in Karnataka. Now with this, what happens? Some of the divinities are purely of the kinship-oriented society in the Tamils, as known from the Sangam literature. You have 5 zones in the Sangam literature. The Marudam, that is the fertile river valleys. The Neidal, that is the coastal area. Kurinji, that is the hilly area. And then what is called the Palai, the forest and partly parched land, the sort of the grass area. Now, these were the chieftaincies area. With the Pallavas coming and the full-fledged monarchy, like the Chalukyas in the Deccan and their arch rivals, begins what may be called the important temple building. Earlier, this area was noted for 2 major Shramanic groups, Buddhist, particularly Jainism. Now, with the coming of the Pallavas, not only wars are constantly being fought against the Karnataka power of the Chalukyas, and that is a recurrent feature. Dynasties would change, but the fight is not between the Pallavas and the Chalukyas. The fight is to control the Raichu Doab between the river Krishna and Tungabhadra, Bhima. Because that is an area which has a fertility, some rainfall, and conducive to rice production. The other area is relatively dry, yielding only ragi and millet. This will go on, the dynasties will shift, but the rivalry between the powers in Karnataka and northern part of Tamil Nadu would go on unabated. I'm not getting into the dynastic. But what is important is the beginning of a distinct South Indian style of temple architecture propagated by the new dynasty of the Pallavas. You can see here, this is the Draupadi, called the Rathas. And then the typical feature of a tiered, you can see almost pyramidal structure, miniaturized what is called the horizontal levels. This is the largest one, but this is the repetition, but in a pyramidal style, miniaturization, and with a huge boulder at the top called the stupika. And this superstructure, we'll see this later, is called the Bimana. Completely different from what we are familiar with, say, the great Shikhara temple in Orissa, Lingaraj, Puri temple. There are many other, and the entire city of Bhubaneswar abounds in this kind of a structure. The North Indian Nagara style is described in Shilpa Shukonasa, like the beak of a bird, tall, tapering, curvilinear top, and this is Bimana, the pyramidal structure. This is called Dravida. This is the basic of the regional features. The politics is regional. You will find that the Chalukyas and Pallavas, later the Cholas and the Western Chalukyas, the Rashtrakutas are known as repeatedly defeating both the Gurjara Pratiharas and Palas. Did these victories lead to any annexation of a territory? Nothing. These are continuous military struggle, endemic wars are going on without necessarily leading to the expansion of territory. All the powers ultimately are rooted to their regions. And the large number of political powers, often this is one problem with the understanding of the political model of Indian feudalism propagated classic text by R.S. Sharma and then his followers. That decentralization, because there is no major single power, and seen as a period of crisis. The point is, this is another historiographical obsession with us, always looking for a stable, centralized, long-lasting, very large political power, a big power indicating it must be centralized. If it is centralized, then it is well administered. If it is well administered and all the royal decisions are followed to the T from at each and every corner from the capital, that is centralized. And therefore peace and prosperity, economic development, cultural efflorescence, so-called golden age. That's a myth. And the absence of centralization, a paramount power or unitary power, gives kind of a nervy situation that, okay, it is decentralization. Always the tendency is to look for a centralized power. It's almost a swing of the pendulum from centralization, which is a great time, to a number of political powers, decentralized, so a period of crisis. The way Professor Sharma, I have highest possible regards for this fascinating scholar, also Dijanta, Keshavan Velutat. Their consideration that with the decentralization, as Sharmaji claimed, parcelization of sovereignty. It's not my term. Parcelization of fragmented, segmented polity, as Bartenstein pointed out. If that is so, and if the process goes on for 700 years, then the situation is almost close to what maybe said by borrowing the Marxian terms, the state would wither away. Does it happen? On the other hand, the proliferation of monarchical society in areas far away from the Ganga plains, into areas as chieftaincies, the monarchical society is spreading by the help of copperplate grants given to Brahmanas, mostly in uncultivable, unsettled territories. And so the spread of monarchical settlement, does it create any absence of the state system? That is the crucial question. It does not. The multiplicity, in fact, the regionalization. As I said, the very temple structure from North India is a clear regional stamp. You don't see a wonderful Nataraja image of the Shaivism is well known in the whole of North India, the exact replication of the Nataraja form of the Cholas replicated in other parts of North India. Similarly, the typical Vishnu figure in Bengal is not replicated, though Vaishnava images are numerous in the deep south in exactly that style, the regional style, the regional delineation of sculpture, of literature. That is the most important feature of the early medieval. That's why if we nowadays talk about federalism and the celebration of regions vis-a-vis a centralization in Indian polity, the roots must go back here. That is the important point I'm asking for. Okay, now, what was happening? Begin with, many of the earlier Buddhist and Jaina traditions are now being taken up by Puranic Brahmanical scenario. Like the two major Pallava rulers, originally were followers of Jainism, they were converted to Shaivism, not much of Vaishnavism, by the two very important Shaiva, I use this in saint, not in the Christians as sant, major ecclesiastical figures. One is Sambandar, the other is Appar. They converted these two rulers into Shaivism. As a result of this, the structures for housing in structural temples, Shiva images. And very interestingly, have you seen this particular superstructure? Quite distinct from the superstructure of the Dravidian type. This in Orissa, and please note, Orissa is one of the typical gateways from North India towards peninsular part. It almost touches the northernmost part of Andhra. The other corridor is the Malwa area, Ujjaini, through which you get into the Deccan. This is called in Sanskrit text on Shilpas as Navakriti. That's an upturned boat shape. In Oriya text, it's called Khakaru. Khakar means a boat, upturned boat. This is the shape. This is found pretty regularly in South India. Okay. And this transformation with a large number of bhakti saints, both on the Shaivas, there are 63 Nayanar religious figures and 12, these are all canonized figures. Later, they were emerging in this period, their hagiographical descriptions would come around the anthologies of 12th, 13th century. Deep devotion, bhakti cult. In fact, the bhakti cult emerges from the Deccan and South India, not from North India. The basic emanating point is Transvindhyan India, particularly the deep south. The Nayanar and the Alavar, 63 Shaiva saints, Nayanar, and 12 canonized Vaishnavas and Alavar. Of these, there are 2 women composers. One is Akka Mahadevi, the other, they both were, one remained unmarried because to her, she was the only possible consort of Vishnu as the life story. I'm not telling of a biography. The lady, as a young girl of 16, came out of her home and claimed to have merged into Vishnu, her only husband, and she composed wonderful poetry but steeped in eroticism. This is another point. This sanitization program of neo-Brahmanical attitude that don't look at those erotic images or erotic things. This is purely an impact of the what may be called the Victorian morality imposed on India, and that still continues. Steeped in eroticism. And the other, Akka Mahadevi of Karnataka, she says that she would make herself almost like a gaul, a pretini, because shorn of her female beauty, and she is She is a married woman. She left her home completely deserting her spouse, telling that the only person fit to be her spouse is Shiva herself. And the emaciated, almost skeleton-like figure and playing cymbals are figuring now both in Karnataka and in Tamil Nadu. Interestingly, in this deep, sweeping, emotional character of South India under the Bhakti is not paralleled by perhaps the greatest thinker, philosophical master of India and South India, particularly Shankaracharya. He has nothing to do with Bhakti. He is typically for the Vedantic knowledge. So that is, from Kerala side, a complete reversal from the ideology that is being pursued by the political powers. Because the political powers now need the support of the Brahmanas who are given the land grants, and the Brahmanas are the legitimizer by performing the Avisheka of the ruler. Till now, most of the temples, the beginning of the South Indian temple, and one of the, and you can, perhaps those who have gone to Mahabalipuram, the wonderful monolithic sculpture of portraying either it's the Bhagiratha bringing down the Gangavataranam scene, or the Kiratarjuniam scene of Bharavi, Arjuna's penance. It's a fascinating sculpture accompanying these. And you can see here the typical features of the taken over by the Brahmanical system from the Buddhist and Jaina rock-cut architecture. This is different from the structural temples made of stone of the slightly later times. So this is one way the Brahmanical system operates: appropriation. This is not accommodation. This is silent appropriation. And please, I have to tell that appropriation is neither a very innocuous nor a very innocent process. There are very sharp asymmetry between the appropriator and the appropriated. That I shall talk about later. And this is the short. Now you see how the pyramidal Bimana soars into the sky. This basic Garbhagriha is square in shape, and the square format ground plan is taken over, but the receding tiers. And please note, this is short term because the Bay of Bengal is almost the port area. It is actually acting as a landmark from the sea. So there is no lighthouse. So these are the markers. And that's why even the Pallavas, who are basically very strongly agrarian society and based on the agrarian revenue as the stabilizing factor of the newly coming up state, please note that they were not ruling over the whole of the deep south. The area is called Tondai Mandalam, southern part of Andhra and northernmost part of present-day Tamil Nadu. This is Tondai Mandalam. The Cholas would be in the Kaveri Delta, Kaveri Valley, called Chola Mandalam. Mandalam is the large unit, supra-local units. I don't use the word province. It's a very British type of expression. It's a large supra-local territorial administrative mandalam. That's why from Chola Mandalam, it's actually the term is Chola with a hard sound. Coromandel comes from there. Okay. And perhaps even the Pallavas, who are essentially an agrarian-based power, had to strike coins, keeping their orientation towards the sea with the figure of the two-masted boats and some stylized figures of the waves. This is the Pallava coin. And Pulakeshin II, the arch rival of the Pallavas, in his famous Prashasti, Ayal Prashasti, talks of his various campaigns, but he too is interested in capturing the Elephant Islands, which is, in a very poetic way, the Lakshmi of the Western Sea. Apara Jaladhar Lakshmi is an as fortunate island in the upper or Western Sea, obviously meaning the Arabian Sea of present times. And close to that, still the lingering of Buddhist principles. This is Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion, the savior Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is one who is almost on the verge of becoming the Buddha, the enlightened. Yet he does not wish to do so till the sorrow of entire humanity is eradicated. He refuses to become the Buddha, the compassion embodiment. And that's why this is a figure from Aurangabad, very close to the Maharashtra area, central Maharashtra area, where the voyagers are on a two-masted ship and Avalokiteshvara is offering protection. It is still an interface between the appeal to shamanic religions and then the emergence of the Brahmanical norms. And perhaps the marvel, even those who have not been here will capture it from Kailasha Kelenkari. It's perhaps I was simply awestruck. It is almost, you can see, it's a rock-cut architecture of a huge Brahmanical Shiva temple, almost, and the rocks are here, the live rocks are here. All areas are extremely rocky area, out of which, almost like the scooping of an ice cream, it is top down. It is not from the base that the construction is there. It is from the top down. It's a massive temple. But the rock-cut architecture is still going on. This is built by the Rashtrakuta ruler Krishna I in the late 8th and early 9th century. Then you have, I'm coming now. In between, I would like to talk of a particular type of, as I said, the fight between the power in Karnataka and the power in Tamil Nadu is endemic. For the control over the Raichur Doab. After the Chalukya Pallava struggle, the Rashtrakutas came and Rashtrakutas more or less followed that model, but with two peculiar continuities. One, the Rashtrakutas were more politically and more aggressive, venturing beyond the Narmada, capturing Kannauj or going right up to Kannauj, but then returning to their base. That's why they remain a regional power. And no use telling every time this is an empire. I am very wary of the use of the term empire. My very basic question, can we point out where the limits of a kingdom ends and the limit of the empire begins? We can't. So it's no use glorifying certain things as empire, and the sort of the love and sort of our association, some love for empire and looking for empire is a problem in understanding of Indian history. With the coming of the Cholas, the most important regional power in the entire South India is coming from the time of Rajaraja I, 985 to 1012, and his son and successor Rajendra, 1012 to 1044. You may say, as I said, the father and sons rule 985 to 1012, 1014, Rajaraja. Rajendra Chola's immediate successor, without any problem in the accession or to the throne, is 1012. And you may be surprised, what is this? The father is ruling up to 1014, the son is already there from 1012. How is it possible? Because there is a conjoint rulership. To avoid the problem of succession to the throne, the inheritor of the throne is brought in the administration in the lifetime of the ruler. So the Cholas were fighting with the most important power in Karnataka, that is the Western Chalukyas, the Chalukyas of Kalyani. And the Cholas were also eyeing another area for a very, very long time. That is what is called the Vengi, the area watered by the river Krishna and the Godavari on the Andhra area. This area, Vengi, is extremely prosperous in its agricultural potential. An inscription of 1186, much later than the period I'm talking about, not of the exactly Chola times. It is called the Sindhu Yugmantaram, between the two big rivers, Ashesha phala sasya yutam, yielding enormous amount and variety of crops. So this is something the Cholas were regularly trying to capture. They did not capture, but often tried to put proteges by getting into marriage alliances. And with constant war between the Western Chalukyas and the Cholas. I'll give you one example here, what was happening. In 1007, when Rajaraja is in full power, there was a terrible battle against the Western Chalukyas. The Western Chalukya inscription tells, in a graphic details, that the advancing Chola army was irrepressible. They came almost close to Bijapur at the very heartland of the Chalukya territory as a result of the terrible Chola onslaught. The Chalukya country is devastated. In fact, the ruler, Chalukya ruler, called Satyashraya, Rajaraja makes a sort of mockery of his name, says that my army has turned Satyashraya, the abode of truth, into Kashtashraya, the abode of misery. And then the details comes that because of the Chola invasion, the Brahmanas Agrahara, that is revenue-free granted area, have been abrogated. The sacred fire from the fire pit of yajnas have been extinguished. Rampant violation of women, killing of children, and then comes the word Jati Nasha. What could have been a greater nightmare in a Brahminical society than the loss of entire Varna Jati system? This is 1007, when North India was regularly, annually being a witness to the campaign from Ghazna. Had this not been mentioned between the forces between two Shaivite powers, both the Chalukyas and the Cholas are ardent devotees of Shiva. They were fighting such a battle that led to one such Jati Nasha, even in a hyperbolic term. So nothing, a problem in India is not merely to be pointed to some outsider coming and invade. The invasions were taking place within the subcontinent because of the aspirant political powers. Invasions is not merely from the northwest into the North Indian plains, but for the Chalukyas, the Cholas are an alien power, and similarly the Cholas consider the Chalukyas as an alien power. So this is the typical feature. Now what was happening? Even before Rajaraja came to power, and the great period of the Cholas come right up to almost 1150, for nearly 250 years, the temple buildings, these are massive structural temples, no further use of the earlier Shramanic type of rock-cut architecture. The Cholas were earlier building temples, what can be called the sepulchral temples, that in remembering the great deeds of their ancestors, particularly if the ancestor fell in a battle, on that site, a big temple would be established. Now, what we call, this is the Brihadishwara temple. If you go to Tanjavur, it dominates the entire landscape of the city. Massive temple, massive temple. It is now called Brihadishwara, particularly after 14th century. It was called Raja Rajeshwara temple. The divinity Ashaiva Linga is called Raja Raja Cholishwara. The ruler and the divine image or the lingam here, the phallic symbol, are almost identical. And this is a major change. Earlier we had the influence of the Pallavas, mainly the Shaiva sons of the Nayanar group. The Vaishnavas were there, but only a marginal figure. Now the Shaiva Siddhantins have come in a very major way as the Rajagurus of the two premier rulers of Rajaraja and Rajendra. And now begins the monumental temple. And the word, when Bartenstein talk about the segmentary, said ritual sovereignty, hugely problematic perspective. Because Bartenstein's model of polity was drawn upon Aidan Soudall's work, anthropological work, on a Alur society in East Africa, which is a hoe cultivation society. And the material base with an extremely complex irrigational facility, large-scale agrarian society with the ability to exact various types of agrarian resources, including forced labor, betti or vishti, in inscriptions, simply do not match with a hoe cultivation society. This is a very problematic analogy he drew upon, and then the basic epigraphic materials came from another great scholar, Y. Subbarala, at this moment the greatest scholar on South Indian history. Subbaralu's book, Political Geography of the Cholo Empire, the division of the Nadu. You take out these two, Stein's book will fall like a pack of cards. I'm very clear on this point. Now, this Saiva Siddhantas, and then this is the royal monumental temple where the ruler will be propitiated almost as a divine being, no longer sepulchral temples. And this is almost a public archive. The entire outer face of the temple, Rajarajeshwara, is inscribed with very detailed, immaculate revenue transfer. 40 villages from both on the Cholamandala area, the core territory, but also from the Tondai Mandalam, which is an intermediate zone, Pandi Mandalam, that is a conquered area of the Pandyas, and even also from Sri Lanka, which half of it already was conquered by Rajaraja Chola, were transferred for the provisions for this huge temple. The revenue resources, resource mobilization is not possible in a segmentary state. You don't have to talk in terms of a centralized unitary state, because there are local elements are very powerful. But this is a public archive, which of the arrangements of the agrarian resources and the control of the Cholo ruler. A stupendous power is writ large here. That's why I'm talking about the epigraphic documentation. And the palace area of the Cholas, close to the temple area, is Kulumukku Palayarai. Of this was Champaka Lakshmi's great work. One portion is represents a sacred center, and contiguous to this is the so-called secular area, the palace of the ruler. So the sacred center and the royal residence is almost merged into one another side by side. You will find the same practice if you go now to Thiruvananthapuram, where you will see the palace of Marthandavarma, 1729 to 1758, almost seen as the maker of modern Kerala. The temple of Anuttaswami Vishnu is almost adjacent to the royal palace. And in Tamil, the term for temple and the royal palace are the same, koil. The deliberate use of the same word is speaking of a particular type of polity. Leading to the possibility of urban centers. This is not the time that urban centers vanished. A different type of urban centers were coming up, including in South India, the temple urbanization. And that is a major feature of the urban development, drawing upon the rural resources. If there is discussion later, I can go in details. I'm not entering into that. And the important point is that this is a period when agrarian development took place in a grand scale, unprecedented degree, leading to the formation of very large capital, but in between the middle tier type of exchange centers, mainly handling agrarian surplus crop. Like this Mandapika is in north, what is present in Mandi. The precedent is Mandapika. And this is Penta in Deccan, partly in also in deep south, what is present the Pet, Narayan Pet, Begum Pet, Kazi Pet. This is Penta, mainly figuring in the Deccan, but also in South India. You can also find similar names. And Pet is pretty clear in, if you go to Pune, there are areas within the old Pune city called Budbar Pet, Shanivar Pet, indicating markets particularly functioned on these 2 days like rural huts, Shanivar, Mongolbar, like that. And then Nagaram. Nagaram is something, it's a mercantile organization at each Nadu. Nadu is an agglomeration of villages. At the village level, you have Adda, which is like the hut or heart in Sanskrit. And at the Nadu, as agglomeration of villages, the middle tier group, supra-local, supra-village, but not like as large as a province. It's almost like a present-day district. That is the Nadu level. And almost at most of the Nadus, you will find a Nagaram, which is an organization of merchants. At the rural level, you have 2 types of villages. One is the Brahmadev village, where the residents are the Brahmanas enjoying land grants from the rulers, either individually or as a community, or institutional grant to a temple which is called Devadana, the given to temple. And so that gives the, from the within, the possibility of an urbanization. And the urban development and development of a complex state society often go hand in hand. They do not stand in isolation. So that's another marker. And as I said, close to this Tanjavur temple, Brihadishwara, this was the new capital built by Rajendra Chola, his powerful son and successor. The classic, once again, monumental temple, and like father's temple, it was called Rajendra Choleshwara. The lingam is called Rajendra Choleshwara. It's only now it's called Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and I have given the dates. And close to this, you will find another temple. This is called Darashuram, of a slightly later Chola temple, monumental temple, and you can see almost reminding the Konarak temple, the wheels drawn by horses in the shape of a chariot, though chariots have completely gone out from warfare as a machinery. No longer, the chariots are not used at all in South India, but it remains as a temple decoration. And very interestingly, if the sculptures, I did not go into that, in the monumental temples like Gangaikonda Cholapuram or in the Brihadishwar are also very large monumental sculptures of Nataraja, of various divinities, female, of particularly a Devi called Kotravai. Kotravai originally was a tribal female goddess. She is portrayed as a fierce goddess, warlike, almost like Durga. Then in the change scenario of what is called the Periya Puranam, the Sthala Puranam, she is seen as the consort of Shiva by gradually becoming almost like the figure iconography that stands on a Mahishas, killing a buffalo. She is like Mahishasuramardini, but already with the influx of Vaishnavism, she also multi-handed. She has her in her 2 hands, Shankha and Gada. It's a peculiar amalgamation of Kotravai. Gradually from a fierce warlike woman, a goddess, turns into almost a spouse of Shiva. Gradually, the spousification is on here. This is also another particular process, and there are fascinating stories in the Tamil Puranic texts, the Sthala Puranas, the Periya Puranas. Periya means big. That's why Periyar, the river and also the great social reformer. Periya Puranam says that often there is a competition between Shiva and the female would-be consort. They are sometimes rivals. Sometimes the Shiva dominates and the woman becomes submissive. But often there is a competition as a dancing competition. And then there is that gender inequality comes very strong in a typical Brahmanical, Puranic oriented social structure. The ultimate dance, to be in the rival story, Shiva performs the Urdhva Tandava dance, that is 1 foot firmly planted on the land or soil, the other feet goes straight up towards the eye, towards the sky. Parvati, this lady Katravai, accepts defeat because of her femininity. She cannot exactly uplift her leg, one leg. So that is seen as a submissiveness and ultimately accepting Shiva's superiority as a consort. That is, these stories are there and is seen in many of the sculptures. But interesting, if on the, we are talking of the monumental sculptures adorning with a political iconography on the temples, but some different is there in this temple on parts of, this is the acrobats. Typical urban entertainment, female acrobats and the spectators. There is another very funny scene. It's a gambling between the ram fight. 2 gamblers. This person has won and that's why he's hailing, and this person has lost, his almost hitting his forehead. So these details are in miniature. These details of social life, a typical urban area with their entertainment is captured. This is the Dharashuram temple. I would now gradually get into a little bit of, and I'll come to the almost the close of it, the sea-oriented feature of South Indian situation, not always through politics. Under the Cholas, the premier port is no longer Kaviripattinam, which I have shown, because one problem of these traditional ports is that these are all at the mouth of the river, so siltation is a major problem. If there is gathering of silt, the port site will move a little bit here and there. So from Kaviripattinam it comes to Nagapattinam, the premier port of the Cholas. Apparently it is very close to Tanjavur, and it's in regular touch with the Chola court. Yet the port site speaks of cultural plurality. At this port was erected and maintained for a very long time a major Buddhist monastery called Chudamani Vihara, and the request for building this Buddhist monastery came to Rajaraja from the Sumatran ruler of Srivijaya, and the Chola ruler accepted the request and made land grants. This is in a large land grant found, it's originally Chola land grant. It came somehow to Indonesia, which then was under the Dutch rule, and they took it to Leiden. That's why it's called Leiden grant, very large one. Then one of the later Chola rulers, Kulothunga Chola, 1070 to 1120, made further land endowments to the same Chudamani Vihara in the very heartland of the Chola power. So not always the Brahmanical, Puranic ideology is being followed. The ability, particularly in the coastal areas, the accommodation of plurality, even plurality of faith, is a hallmark of South Indian coastal society, maybe also many. And this, interestingly, the Cholas, you know, are known for a very unusual political pattern. They are regular maritime expeditions. One in the case of Sri Lanka, first captured half the northern part captured by Rajaraja, then his son completed the victory turned Sri Lanka into a mandalam, Ila mandalam, as a dependent province-like territory under the Cholas. And then we know of the 1025 famous Kalaram campaign of Rajendra Chola, that 12 areas in mainland and maritime Southeast Asia were conquered. But please note, not a single territory were annexed to the Chola Empire. Nothing. So territorial annexation is not the issue. At the same time, the Cholas were in regular touch with Chinese Song Empire, and which figures in the Song Court Chronicles, the Cholo country is Junian, the Cholo country, and it records 3 embassies reached from Junian country to the Song Court, obviously for business and trading opportunities, both before the Kalaram campaign and after the Kalaram campaign. That is during the time Rajendra and Kulottunga. These 3 embassies reach. At least in 2 embassies, the leader of the royal embassy, obviously for business purposes, came from 2 Arab merchants who came to South India. This is the scenario. Then why did the Cholas try to conquer these areas? The point is the situation of Srivijaya. I have a map. Srivijaya is in what is called Sumatra, the northern part of present-day Indonesian archipelago. At the southernmost point of very large island of Sumatra is Srivijaya, the modern Palembang. Srivijaya was very close and made regular embassies and representations at the at the Junian court. So, possibly in order to minimize the commercial importance and the role of an intermediary between the Song court and the Cholo area, the importance of Srivijaya needed to be minimized, and that's why the Cholas. In fact, after the major Cholo offensive without any annexation against Srivijaya, the Song Court Chronicles, almost for next 75 years, make very little reference to Srivijayan embassies coming to the Cholo, to the Song Court. So this was the minimization of the role of Srivijaya in a commercial intermediary in the Eastern Indian Ocean was possibly the major point of the campaign of the maritime campaign of the Cholo ruler Rajendra Chola. Usually people merely talk of another major military campaign of Rajendra Chola, what is called the Gangetic campaign, the Gangai Konda. From Tanjavur along the entire eastern seaboard, it reaches the Ganga Delta. And that's why he's claimed to have brought holy Ganga water to consecrate his new capital. That's why it's called Gangai Konda, the captor of the Ganga. The point is this, when it is taking place. This long Gangetic campaign all along the eastern seaboard from Tanjavur to Ganga Delta, including the eastern part of Ganga Delta, which is present-day Bangladesh, Bangala area, is done during the year 1022 to 1024. Next year, 1025, Rajendra Chola launches his Kalaram campaign in maritime Southeast Asia. The chronological sequence perhaps tells us that first, the entire control and supremacy, Cholo military supremacy over the entire eastern seaboard is established so that there is no further challenge to the military operations overseas. And then in next year, the campaign in the actual open sea in the Bay of Bengal has taken place. So there is a sequential character here. Interestingly, apart from Nagapattinam, there is another major port the Cholas were able to control. This is Visakhapatnam, exactly what is now Visakhapatnam. This is a port with remarkable antiquity known in inscriptions from 1068. However, it became renamed as Kulothunga Cholapattalam, obviously named after the very powerful Chola ruler Kulothunga Chola, as I said, 1070 to 1120, nearly 50 years of reign, because Kulothunga Chola originally hailed from Andhra area. He became the Chola ruler by a dynastic marriage between the eastern Chalukyas and the Chola house. For the first time, the aspiration of the Cholas to bring Andhra coastal area within the Chola realm materialized with the accession of Kulothunga Chola, who came from Bengi area between the two great rivers, the delta of Godavari and Krishna. There Kulothunga, originally an eastern Chalukya ruler, became a Chola ruler and then put his name to the renamed port of Visakhapatnam called Kulothunga Cholapattanam, obviously to enhance the importance of this port vis-a-vis Nagapattinam. So now there are two major ports on the eastern seaboard controlled directly by the Cholas. And their interest in the Indian Ocean, particularly Bay of Bengal sector, is pretty well known. I'm not getting into the details. This is as a very famous Chola Nataraja figure. It's a form of Shaiva worship, no doubt, from the reign of Vikrama Chola, the son and successor of Kulothunga Chola. This form of Shiva worship became almost the titulary deity for the entire Chola dynasty. From the Lingam worship, an iconic almost, now this famous Chola bronze figure. Please also consider the very large number of bronzes during the Chola period and also after the Chola period in the major form of icon production. Bronze is manufactured, is available only by a mixing copper with tin, and tin is not available in India. So the very making of the bronze images would mean that tin is being resourced from somewhere else. The only area which could be accessible from South Indian point of view is Peninsula Thailand, the area of Takuapa, what is called the Isthmus of Kra. This is the narrowest passage on the eastern side of the Bay of Bengal and the eastern side of Thai Peninsula, that is the Gulf of Siam. You can almost cross the area on foot. This is the narrowest passage, a land passage connecting the two seaways. This is the area from where regular availability of tin would come and then lead to the manufacturing of various ritual objects, including icon production, particularly the great Chola bronzes. It has a maritime network story inside that. Similarly, another material that would be indispensable for any Indic ritual activities is camphor. Camphor is essential in any temple or even in Buddhist worship for lighting the holy lamp. Camphor has a medicinal value. When even nowadays we use the wicks for this is having a base in camphor. It's an insecticide, insect repellent. It has the use for making condiments. You may recall, narkole toktite kurput deya hoy. It gives a fine taste. It's a coolant. Before the days, I am old enough, you people, I am almost dinosaur, you people who cannot imagine. Before the days of the refrigerators, most of the times in terrible summer in the surahis or kunjo or kolshi, water with a few drops of camphor will make it a little bit cool. It's a coolant. Camphor is of varieties of use, but not available in India. The best quality camphor would come from northernmost tip of Sri Lanka, Sumatra. what is became later as Aceh in the Dutch records. This is the land of best possible camphor. And we have indications from a completely different types of source, the Jewish Geniza trade letters. Jewish merchants from Cairo would come all the way down the Red Sea and the Western Indian Ocean to Kerala. From Kerala, some of them even traveled to Aceh to get camphor, which came to India partly, and from India then exported further to Aden, where the Arabic word from corpora becomes kafur, from kafur to camphor in Latin. So it's a remarkable journey from an Southeast Asian island and of multiple use, but it is not available in the subcontinent, like tin. By this time, gradually the Vaishnava element is making its show in Deep South. The best indication is that of Ramanuja, who is the most important figure after Shankara, but he brings Vishishtadvaitavada, not Advaitavada. And his seat was Ranganatha temple in Tiruchirappalli, the famous temple. There is a kind of hagiographical account of the life of later times of Ramanuja, is that he is historically assessed as the pontiff of this entire complex. And please note, these are not merely temples, shrines, these are mathas, temple complex, where there is a shrine of the principal and other subsidiary divinities, along with sort of institutions for Vedic and other Puranic, Agamic learning teachers, students, artisans, and you can understand all these were recipient of huge amount of agrarian endowments. But you cannot expect that the Brahmanas would till the soil. So there are various types of service groups, including the accountant, the astrologer, various types of service ritual groups, those who play the drums, play the conch shells, including also the Devadasis, the temple women and the dancers, all of whom used to get landed endowments from the political authority. So it's a motto, it's a complex, not merely a temple. And with the growing importance of Vaishnava faith in Deep South, particularly because of Ramanuja, there was a political reaction. The hagiography of these great philosophers tell us that Ramanuja was expelled from Ranganatha's temple by a Cholo ruler. It was K. Nilakanta Shastri, one of the greatest names in South Indian history, who identified this Cholo ruler with Kulotunga I. And Kulotunga is a person who brings in the importance of Nataraja Shiva cult, particularly at two major sacred centers, at Kumbakonam and Chidambaram. So there could be sectarian tensions also. Not everything is simple, tailor-made and ironed out all the differences. As I said, if you look at this map of the subcontinent, ports are there mostly in Deccan and South India, because except the Bengal coast in Chattogram area here and close to that Sandip, there are some ports in Orissa, but most of the ports are either on the west coast and the east coast of the peninsular India, catering to the networks of maritime commerce both in the Western Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal sector. And this is the Indian Ocean World Network. It goes right up to Egypt, which is almost acting as a hinge between the westernmost Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. This was not the days of Vasco da Gama, who come all along the Western African coastline and then circumnavigates Cape of Good Hope to enter into Indian Ocean. you have to get into the Mediterranean, and then from Mediterranean, Egypt, or in Constantinople area, then it is taken to the Italian city-states. So you can see the importance both of the Persian Gulf sector and the Red Sea sector, and then the proliferation of ports in the Maritimes and mainland Southeast Asia. Exactly Mayuradingam. Manakkavaram is Nicobar Islands, Mahanakkavaram. The importance of this island in the maritime campaigns of the Cholas is enormous. And then this is Kedah, Malaya Peninsula. And this is the area of Takuapa in this. And all these other areas in the island, in the what may be called the insular Southeast Asia. And these are the areas where the Chola offensives can be seen. I'll go on quickly. The interesting point, this is the model of the sculptured ship at Borobudur was used by R.K. Mukherjee way back in 1912 in his book, Indian Shipping. This is not an Indian ship at all. This is a typical Southeast Asian prahu with a different type of construction technique, and this outrigger canoe has nothing to do with any Indian ships. But its contact with Indian mainland is beyond any doubt. One interesting point you may note, for the Western world, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea area, including the Mediterranean, they were procuring Indic commodities, textiles for example, various types of aromatics, particularly the black pepper from Kerala, Golmorich. These were coveted items for which, and Indian products were a craze in the Western areas. Naturally, not much was brought back by the Indian merchants from the Western world to the subcontinent. That's why you do not find Indian coins in Western Asia or Egypt. On the other hand, the entire Indian subcontinent, right from the trade of the Roman world down to the medieval times, can be seen as a sink basin of precious metal coins in India. It's a sink basin because these were being repeatedly brought. The scenario is different in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia was the procurement area of a number of commodities, including, as I said, the tin of regular use, of camphor, various types of other metals, sandal, and also some textiles. So it's a different kind of a network in the Eastern Indian Ocean. As a result of which we find a very large number of Tamil inscriptions overseas, completely throwing out a window the Puranic and Dharma Shastra prohibition on sailing Kalapani. It is seen in the Sanskrit treatises as Kalivarjya, acts to be proscribed during the terrible age of Kali, and seafaring is heading the list of the Kalivarjyas. Tamil merchants' inscriptions are found in Sri Lanka, in Sumatra, in Myanmar, Pagan area, as I said, in peninsular Thailand. There are many Tamil Javanese inscriptions, and also a Tamil inscription from eastern China near a port with a Tamil Chinese version also available. And this is the name of usually I'll tell, this is a person, Champanda Perumal, alias Twat Chakravartikal. They were making charity. Why these merchants are writing inscriptions? They were successful merchants, and they were patronizing temples either of Vishnu or Buddha or Shiva in overseas areas, and talking of how great patrons to these divinities they were as devotees. So they write outside India, their own Prashasti is bereft of any royal eulogy. And these are the groups called 500 Swamis of Ayyavole, which is an umbrella merchants group. You have Manigramam, you have Nana Deshi, the very name was an itinerant merchant, Nana Deshi. You have the type of Anjubbannam. Usually these are the merchants group of either Arabic-speaking Muslims and the Jewish merchants. I'll talk about the Jewish later. So this is an arena which speaks of remarkable accommodation of plurality. That's why I'm looking at the coastal areas. The coastal areas are much better in absorbing pluralities, more open, less orthodox than the interior of the mainland of the subcontinent. The indications would come, like here it's a bilingual inscriptions. When you have Tamil Sinhala inscriptions, when you have Tamil Javanese inscriptions, it speaks of bilinguality, sometimes multilinguality. I'll talk a little bit more. And the coastal societies, unlike the land powers, have an orientation towards the sea. This is the figure of the ruler from Goa who is on board the ship, and here it's the arm is broken, he's shooting an arrow, which is called a Vidagal inscription, that is a hero stones. Someone died during the sea battle. The rulers of Goa and Konkan area would regularly have their political epithet Paschima Samudradhipati. By that they were not becoming a naval power. They did not have any flotilla to combat and claim the sea as a sovereign contested area. But this is a peculiar epithet, the political orientation of the coastal society towards the sea, not of fear. And interestingly, the Goa Kadamba rulers often take the pride in telling that they were sailing out of Gopakapattanam, which is Goa present day, to Someshwara, that is Somnath, in 12th century to pay homage to the Shiva deity of Somnath. So first of all, please note there are many other things, I'm not getting in details. In Gujarat, the 1025 raid of Ghaznavid ruler at Somnath, which is often portrayed as the final blow and the darkness on so-called Hindu civilization, is a complete lie, wrong and myth. Somnath continues very much after the invasion of the Ghaznavid raid. There are ample evidence, I'm not... But the Goa rulers taking a pilgrimage, not on foot, but on sea in their own ships, that they claim in their own Prashasti-like inscriptions. And that's why in Konkan area, what is close to Pune, Junnar area, this is the famous Naneghat Pass. It gives a shortcut from the mainland into the coastal area, close to what is Kalyan. Kalyan is now a suburb of Mumbai. It was earlier a port. You can see that people are still using occasionally, particularly these are the visitors, but people, particularly the livestock keepers, they often roam around with their cattle and other domesticated animals through these shortcuts. And here, the Silahara rulers, typical of the coast, this is a toll-taking stone jar with a slit. You drop the coin. They are as toll. And the coins under Nanakatanka is a particular type of silver coin. The pass that collected the point of collection of the Nanaka type of coins as tolls is called the Naneghat. This in Sahyadri area is still available, and one can easily go and see this area. If I once again go back to the far south, this is Kerala. You can see this is a typical backwater of Kerala, giving you the access towards the sea. And this is Kodungallur, not far from present-day Kochi, where stands the Mar Thoma Church. to this charge, the St. Thomas charge. In 849, the local Kerala ruler granted revenue-free lands by a copper trade, which is very common. It was not merely given to Indic deities, but also for, it's called the Syrian Christian charge. It's a Isho, that is Jesus. Sapir Isho is the person who is the leader of the community, and Martoma is the establishment, St. Thomas Church. Land was given, which is understandable. What is remarkable is that this is a land grant given to a religious establishment of Syrian Christians. Naturally, the entire grant is written in Malayalam language by the royal order. It also has names of signatories, the witnesses, ordinary people, not any of the royal family, some officers are there, but those who are present witnessing the sacred act of donating land to a religious institution. Who are the signatories? The language is Malayalam. There are 3 sets of languages. Arabic in Kufic character, Hebrew, and Pahlavi, which is a Middle Iranian language. Obviously, speaking of the presence of these 3 language users as merchants in the coastal Kerala society. This is the accommodative spirit. And similarly, in 1000 later, the Jewish settlement also received from another Kerala ruler in early 11th century similar land grants. The person, Joseph Rabban, is another Jewish merchant who as the representative of Jewish diasporic group, small minority group, they are receiving land grants. And please understand, these are all diasporic groups who can maintain their existence only with the accommodation and approval of the respective host society. That is absolutely clear. There could be some tussles, there could be some segregations, but this is writ large. I'll now end it up by talking about the Jewish materials. South India, particularly Kerala area, is writ wonderfully in the letters of traveling Jewish merchants. These are not stone inscriptions, not Sanskrit texts, not royal prashastis, not kavyas. Day-to-day mundane letters of traveling Jewish merchants. Anyone familiar with Amitabh Ghosh's book In an Antique Land will be able to get the flavor of it. These merchants, Jewish merchants, are usually coming from Al-Mehdia, what is Tunisia, often Algeria, even sometimes from Al-Andalus, that is Spain, southern part of Spain, coming to northern part of Africa. They were merchants. Then they reach what is Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt. And Fushtat, what is present-day Cairo, is the capital. And once again, the importance of the Jewish merchants as a minority group in an Islamic caliphate as merchants. They were regularly coming to Al-Hind. That's why they are called in these letters. They are Jewish merchants, but Arabic is the lingua franca. So it's a Judeo-Arabic language where they are traveling to the Indian Ocean. Musafirun al-Hind. They are coming to India by the Indian Ocean. And very large number of them were settling down in Kerala as diasporic group. The classic case is that of Abraham ben Iju, who is the recipient of most number of letters. Now we have 458 such letters of these Jewish Indic merchants who came to Hind and occasionally said, like this person called Abraham ben Iju, who is a Tunisian Jew and stayed in India from 1132 to 1149. Married a Tulu lady, had 3 children. What is interesting, apart from his business activities, I'm talking once again of plurality. In recent times, a wonderful book by Elizabeth Lambourne called Abraham's Luggage. The social life of things within inverted comma, in the Indian Ocean Network. It is about, just by chance, a fragment of a piece of letter was found out in the archive of Abraham Iju. It was known, but historians did not pay attention. Elizabeth did. She's a good friend of mine. Elizabeth did. What is this? This is a luggage list. Like if you are staying, say, for 20 years in Chennai and now relocating for your official work to Delhi, you will have your packers and movers to take your luggage somewhere. Or if you are traveling, say, posted for some work in Switzerland, and then you are moving on to the US, you will be allowed to carry your extra luggages as unaccompanied luggage called personal effects. It is some kind of a luggage list. What it has, Abraham ben Iju is going back home after nearly 20 years in Kerala, in Mangalore, Al-Manjarur. That was his main operation area. He also ran a bronze factory there. He is accompanied by his unmarried daughter. The wife has already predeceased. It is in this context, he is going by a very long overseas journey back home. So, he has to pack many provisions. Huge gunny bags of wheat and flour. After all, he is a Jew from the Mediterranean world, and bread is their basic dietary culture. Along with some wine, because bread and wine is another major dietary ritual for the Jews. But he is also carrying with him many gunny bags of rice, because 20 years in Kerala has turned him also into the rice-eating culture. So he is carrying these two basic items. There is also other provisions, including some fruits, some, interestingly, 3 or 4 bottles of limon, that is limbu, because extract of lemon prevents scurvy on long seaborne journey. Then there is also a kursi he is carrying, because he needs a little bit of relaxation occasionally on the deck. There is no cabin facility. So along with this, there is, very interestingly, some bottles of sabun, that's an Arabic word, sabun, for washing purposes. And very interestingly, the luggage list also carries a rat-catching device, which is only to be expected on a ship where you have provisions of food. Now, what is this? The point is, during the oceanic journey, the person in his dietary culture, and also you may call it a postural culture, even when he's mobile, he's looking for the comforts and lifestyle in his domestic activities. Even when he's mobile, he's looking for the domestic space on a boat. That's why the kursi, that's why a particular window, unfinished window is carrying with him, and the typical food. So even when in moving, you are looking for a domestic space, the domestic usual practices that carries during the journeys. So this is a world, and not each and every person coming from Egypt as a Jewish merchant was successful in India. So there is a fascinating letter by a husband writing to his wife. We do not know what the wife wrote. That letter is no longer available. But the husband is away to India for perhaps more than 5-6 years, and there is no surety when he would come back home. The wife is frustrated and in fact threatens a divorce suit. Now the husband writes a remarkable appealing letter telling that he can understand his wife's predicament. He is eager to go home but cannot go home because his business ventures has not been successful. He cannot go back home empty-handed, and tells that please do not listen to your so-called advisors at home, because if you take this kind of a decision, then it cannot be reverted. And then he tells, like you, I am also extremely lonely and boring in this land far away from my home. To get rid of this loneliness and boredom, I have occasionally taken to drinking. Then the very interesting line, but I have not misbehaved, indicating perhaps he did not visit a whorehouse. And these are the lamentations also for being separated from family, which is part of the coastal way of life. And this makes a very peculiar way of South India agrarian society, occasionally very strictly Brahminical in character, yet the coastal society is accommodative of non-local population of a completely different cultural practices, including the Jewish Christians, and also many Yavanas or Arabic merchants who are regularly coming, both in Konkan area, also in the area of Malabar. This is something very common. That's why the coastal perspective is only available in the peninsular India, not in North Indian culture. And the possibilities of multiplicity, plurality, the accommodation of diversity. I'm not talking deliberately of toleration, tolerance. Tolerance is something, almost a virtue we are preaching from a pulpit. No, it's accommodation of plurality. It's accommodation, which is part and parcel of a coastal society. And even a very strong Shaivite house, ruling house, like the Cholas, would also accommodate Vaishnava shrines, would also accommodate the worship of goddess cult. So, and the accommodation of a major Buddhist monastery at the premier Cholo port at the request of royal favor. So these are varieties of images that break down a monolithic standardized image of so-called Hindu Brahminical India already in the 10th, 11th century. And that image, South India, like other parts of the subcontinent, also helps us to explain. What I tried to do is not for seeking glory. What is now being repeatedly being stated by many political persons, that history is to be studied for the glories of my country. Please understand, by glorification, you are actually, in an unstated manner, telling some others are below us. So that is the main point, not the glory. Moment you talk about the glory, the point is the unstated search for some other inferior people. And then it begins bigotry and hate culture. And this was often great historians could succumb to this, seeking of glory for the sake of the nation. The classic example is being none other than Ramesh Chandra Majumdar. Such a great historian. He is talking in 1926-27, someone talked about the Greater India Society. You go to anywhere in Southeast Asia since 1960s till today, that Indians built Hindu colonies there, and then you will find what kind of reception you get. Telling that a colonial subject, after all, like R.C. Majumdar, such a great historian, considering that Indians were making others colonize people, even not by militarily, by even culturally. And Majumdar categorically said the people in Southeast Asia were inferior people, and the transplantation of Indian culture like dhan roar moton. Completely unsupportable statements. And moment the Southeast Asian areas became decolonized after the Dutch and the French left, the Greater India Society movement just vanished like a bubble. There is nothing of that, and hugely criticized. Only person of the Indians who did not take to this is Rabindranath Tagore. If you see his Javajatri Patro, he's talking of the marvels and the contacts. There are definite cultural exchanges and imprints of Indic culture are there in Southeast Asia. But that does not mean a colony and transplantation of Indian culture. And please also note the views, the hugely Europeanized, Eurocentric approach of this great scholar like R.C. Majumdar, when he writes the book, Hindu Colonies in the Far East. What is the area? Cambodia. Is Cambodia Far East from India? You could say Southeast Asia, Far East from the European point of view. Why the Far East label is almost unconsciously the Eurocentric labels are being placed as a nationalistic fervor. That is what B.D. Chattopadhyay used to call the problem of perspective. And that I'm tried to address. Thank you very much.
Been discussing about the different port cities like Rangapattinam, Visakhapatnam, also Masulipattnam. Now, was there any, in your map, I didn't see that, but in your slide rather, but was there any port town like Chennai Pattinam from which the term Chennai has come for Madras? Or if it is there, then that, which time did it come up?
Many Patnams are Pattanam. And Chennapatnam probably comes for the first time around 17th, 18th century. In some European documents, it could have existed. It could have existed, but the prominence a port would get would depend on many other things. First of all, the hinterland of a port. The port does not produce anything. It needs a supply zone. And then it outreach the foreland. And then you also need a dynastic hinterland to integrate the coast with the port. Indic rulers did not look at the sea space, I mean Indic including the Mughals. They did not see the oceanic space as a sovereign area like the land. The Europeans did. When Vasco da Gama conquers Goa and up to even Macau, the entire area is seen as the property of the crown of Portugal from Lisboa to Macau. The entire sea space is a part of the crown. That is never done. It's a political culture. It's not the weakness or strength of, it is simply not there.
Moving on to the next question. Sir, I think I'm quite audible. So
Yes,
it
please.
was so good and fluid, it was like hearing a fairy tale. So it was just a pleasure listening to you. Now, I have two queries. First is that, sir, B.D. Chattopadhyay had said that in North India there was peasantization of tribes. In Peninsular, do we see such things? And the other is, sir, as Harbans Mukhi had said, that the Indian peasantry is a very heterogeneous body. There are various classes and types of peasants. Sir, for South Indian context, the ruling class, I should not say class, the rulers. We know for North there is Chaudharis, Rajan, Rajanyas and such terms. But for South, what do you call the rulers? Because there are chieftains and all. The Samanta word is very tricky. So
There are various layers. Thank you very much. I can tell certain features, the sort of the transformation of the so-called tribal groups into what may be called the elites. It's a classic case in South India. This is happening around 13th century, not during the heydays of the Cholas. In the 13th century, you find land grants or land donations, not revenue-free land grants, but donation of lands to different temples, are done by people who were ordinary warriors, possibly in the Cholo army, or regularly the Cholo army. These were coming from the hilly areas, what is called the Mullai area in the Sangam literature, the hilly area, uncultivated, almost in the backyard of the settlements. These people, this is the, what may be called the military labor market for the Cholas. They were recruiting these people for so many centuries. Many of these warriors were in the service of the Cholas, got some wealth, including wealth from the usual loot during the pillage of the wars. Now they have become wealthy. They are donating lands in order to upgrade them in society. And then comes something revelatory. In a grant, when you make a grant of land, a donation of piece of land, even without any revenue remission, you are an ordinary person, not a ruler, so you cannot give remission to revenue, but you can give a land. Gift of land in the Dharmashastra tradition is the highest, best possible gift. Highest gift. And the repeated statements in inscriptions say this is the most virtuous act, pious act, and anyone takes away the donated land is one of the Mahapataka. His successors, predecessors will rot in the excreta in hell for 60,000 years. This is the usual Abhishapa. Usual Abhishapa. The imprecatory statements at the end of the copper plate. These people are telling, I have the notes, but I think I can tell you the basic things. They are telling these people are now the landowners from original warriors. Now they are giving land to temples and employing, perhaps the temple can employ some service groups for some supply of flowers, the money is required. Then they are telling, this provision will exist till the sun and moon. This is a perpetual grant. If any Brahmana violates this, he will be born, his wife will be given to a very warlike, violent group of people, Pulayar. They may be kind of brigands. Almost, we shall throw his wife to these brigands, almost to this present, almost to be sent for being raped. The violating Brahmana would be born as a pig and a dog. If the person is already dead, he should get no better treatment than a dead dog or a pig. This is why this is happening. The interesting in 13th century, the Cholas and the Pallavas for a very long time organized and patronized the Brahmanas and the leading agricultural caste called the Vellalas. Now they enjoyed all the dividends for these land grants at the cost of these lower order who are essentially at the fringe, literally outside the settlement, the warriors, and that's why there is a reaction against the Brahmana landholders. Because the Brahmanas have already come in the picture as grabbing lands. So this is the imprecatory verse. And some of these people are turning into other important professions, like the Kaikkolar. The Kaikkolar was originally a fighting group from the hill areas recruited by the Cholas. After 13th century, particularly 14th century, they become premier weaving groups and get much more acclaim in the society in an area which is famous for its textile products. So these are the markers of social changes. The Vellalas and the Brahmanas considerably exploited these people. And I can give you what kind of treatment they would get. The largest Chola land grant, having 87 copper plates, extremely heavy. 87 copper plates. Normally in the copper plates, maximum space is taken by eulogizing the ruler or his predecessor. What great family, this is the achievement, he defeated such and such ruler. That will take almost 3/4. Then comes the operative part. This part of the land was given in such and such district on such and such occasions to this Brahmana or the temple for the merit of the ruler against these provisional terms and conditions. That these are the revenue remitted, these are the officers to look, etc., etc. The largest Chola grant, and it was edited and translated masterly by Y. Subbaraalu from Tiruvindalur. This is of the time of the immediate Rajendra Chola's time. After that, 3 rulers, all ruling for a brief period. 500 Brahmanas were brought from different parts of the Cholo country to give their renewed settlement area. Lots of provision, not much of eulogy, but the details of land allotment measures. At the end, there is a section what is called Vyavastha. Vyavastha is not arrangement or bandobast. Vyavastha is almost a punitive statement, telling that if in this Brahmana's habitat, the Paraya group enters, use the toddy tapping, uses certain paths within the settlement. If the Parayas have failed to pay the taxes, they can be captured, beaten, put to death. So this is part of the land grant statement. And naturally, this is 1055, 1060. By 2 centuries have gone by. Now the lower order, particularly when the powerful Cholas are not there, the Pandyas are gradually waning out of their power. This is the time when gradually, that's why the Alauddin Khalji's Sultanate army could come and almost 4 major South Indian houses fell like pack of cards. The Yadavas, the Kakatiyas, the Hoysalas and the Pandyas. This is the time when they are fomenting their voices and using rather filthy such imprecatory statements against the Brahmanas whom they see as exploiters. That social change. This is seen in some of the works of Noburo Karashima. One, this I did not tell, or I just went out of my head. One great advantage of studying South Indian inscriptions is that the number is so large, huge number of inscriptions, that way back in 1980s, these inscriptional data were computerized, put to a statistical inquiry and a frequency table. How many times a particular land tax have been used in which areas? The Chola core area, intermediate area, or in Kongu Nadu, that is Kongudesha, what is present-day Coimbatore area, far away from the Cholo heartland, where it is being taken, what kind of forced labor was being employed in the making of the major monumental temples of the Cholas. Vetti, how many times? It's a frequency table could be done. That's a major methodological change. And Subbaraalu is at this moment the largest figure in this kind of study. He's a fascinating scholar. Subbaraalu, both an epigraphist, and he is a Telugu speaking person, knows Tamil, knows Sanskrit. He is also an archaeological field worker. So it's a very rare combination. He can do these things.
We'll move on to the next question now.
I see a hand, yeah.
Sir, thank you so much for the lecture. So you were talking about the Parayas, and also you have talked about the domestic space, carrying domestic space while being mobile. I was wondering about the influence of these South Indian temples beyond the Indian Ocean area. I'm giving you the context. I'm talking about the late 19th and early 20th century when the indentured laborers were South Indians specifically the Dalit, for example, the Tallar, Banyar, Palli. These Dalit laborers were being transported from Nagapattinam to several colonies like Burma, Ceylon, Malay. Now the reason why I'm asking is that we also find similar kind of temples being built on several plantation estates. I have studied some of the temples in Malay. Now the reason why I'm asking this question is that what would you call this complex process of temple buildings or the identity assertion by the appropriated through the building of temples for the appropriators?
Can you repeat what you say? Appropriation. I would. That's an interesting position.
What would you call this complex process of identity assertion by the appropriated, the lower caste indentured laborers, through building temples of appropriators? Because most of these temples were being financed by the upper castes only, Chettiars.
My point is, in the case of the lower social order groups, it is only natural they would be aspiring for a better recognition in society, for if not, and when we talk about the social status in Bodno Jati norms, Bodno is merely a theoretical expression, it's really the Jati norms. Regarding this status, one needs to be a little bit more sensitive regarding what is a ritual status and what is an actual status. Ritual status would be determined by the fact of birth, family traditions. The actual status could be determined by the material factors. You could come from a relatively low Bodno Jati affiliation. By going abroad, not in this case of indentured labor, your financial or material lot has improved. And that actual status may not be commensurate with the ritual status. But it is also important for these appropriated Dalit groups or the lower order to now aspire for a slightly higher rank in the society. So temple building is a pious, laudable act, even if you are part of a construction labor group. That in other cases from the period I am more familiar with, I can give you one example.
Aspiring for a higher rank, in that case, whose hierarchy is that?
I am giving you an early medieval scenario from North India. This is 990s AD in a place called Siarduni near Bulandshahr. It's a marketplace, a mandapika, Pattana mandapika, a mandi with an urban proportion, where a person, a merchant, he is donating pretty lavishly to 5 temples and is telling he is not a merchant of a very precious commodity. He says, I am a Nemaka Banijo, a salt dealer, whose father also was a salt dealer. So he is following a hereditary profession. Obviously, he has amassed considerable wealth so that he can offer patronage to 5 temples. And categorically says, I have given so much of money to this such and such temples. So this is sort of a pious charity which leads to an improved social status as a patron. At the end of the record, he is making a sum total. I, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, as a Nemaka Bonija, have given so much money, total this. And then suddenly at the last, he says, I am Nemaka Jati. No Dharma Shastra by any fictive claims of this Bodno Sangha. That's a horrible, I would say, fictitious legality. Fictive legality, that mixture through marriage of unequal castes lead to Bodno Sangha. Which Bodno Sangha theory can explain the person who is telling so far Nemaka Banijo, suddenly becoming Nemaka Jati. This Jati status may not ultimately give him what he is aspiring for, but that's an avenue to claim for a status. Otherwise, his very position, maybe of a pariah, will be a marked that this is untouchable. This is not to be seen, to be segregated. Similar things were happening in North India, even in 13th century. You may know that the Qutub Minar was not destroyed, but badly ravaged 4 or 5 times by lightning strike. So regular repairment was done. And during these repairs, we have names of 6 to 8 Chandalas. They are literate. They are telling that we are Chandalas and our revered divine figure is Vishwakarma. They are writing in Hindi. In which Brahmanical institutions the Chandalas, let alone repairment, will they be allowed anywhere near the sacred precincts? So these are some of, and that's why I'm always looking for this descriptive category of sources like inscriptions, rather than going by textual narratives, and particularly prescriptive textual narratives. I'm very wary of the statements of Manu and other statements. No, I have problems with that.
By this, we come to an end of the question-answer session. Okay, okay, you can.
Yeah, please. I think she may need.
No, I can be loud.
No, please, you use the microphone.
Hello, sir. I am Snigdha Banerjee from Loreto College. My question to you is, sir, according to my small amount of readings that I have done, I have understood that economy is central to polity. So, on that basis of understanding, the Cholas increasing their naval power and naval bases and continuing with a large amount of trade that perhaps was never seen in India before. So, has it something to do with the luxury need demands of the time? Like, in the 14th, 15th century onwards, as in the West, we see that the feudalism is breaking and the shift towards the Mediterranean Atlantic is because of the changing luxury need demands of the feudal lords or the feudal serfs. So was it something similar that happened in India that led to the increased amount of trade?
Thank you very much. It's a complex question, but I'm very thankful that you raised this matter. First of all, let me begin with a clarification. The Cholas had no navy. They did not maintain a regular naval fleet for their warlike activities. Because for that, the primary political culture is to consider a particular ruler's adjacent or distant maritime space as a sovereign space like land, which could be expanded, which could be contested, which could be defended. That is not there before the Portuguese came to the subcontinent. I'll give you one typical example. This was pointed out long back by Geneviève Bouchon regarding the gradual expansion of the Portuguese in the early 16th century. It is 1536-37 regarding Gujarat. The Portuguese have already come into Goa, then Daman Diu, and the Gujarat Sultanate. The ruler is Bahadur Shah, not Bahadur Shah Zafar, of course. He is a Muzaffarid Sultan. And the Portuguese were doing havoc. So some of his courtiers suggested the ruler that let us teach us some lesson to the Firangis. By also we have some ships, also we can take it out from the merchants and give them a befitting answer for their wickedness. What was the response of Bahadur Shah, the Muzaffarid ruler? He said, fighting with ships in the sea is the function of the Saudagar. I am a Sultan, I am not a Saudagar. Let them fight me on the land. So if this is the political culture, there is no need to raise a regular navy to constantly defend or expand your maritime sovereignty. That question did not arise. This is one. The Cholas had the flotilla, which they used to conquer Sri Lanka, and also, without any conquest, a very major victory in maritime and mainland Southeast Asia. But also see what is the impact. The Chola naval expedition to Kalaram is for a single year, 1025-26. No occupation. The Cholas began to intervene into Sri Lankan politics from 995-96 during the time of Rajendra. How many years? Already after the death of Rajendra Chola, 1044, constant uprising in Sri Lanka are become a thorn in the interest of the Cholas. First, the southern half become independent of the Cholas. Soon after the death of Rajendra Chola, by 1070, the entire Sri Lanka area is gone, completely independent of Cholo rule. So how many years? In terms of what we call ancient India, where minimum calculation is by 500 years, it is a flimsy little bit of time for 75, 80 years. And a power with conscious application of naval prowess will not allow it to fizzle out like this. Second point, the question of luxuries. I have two basic points to raise. Luxuries for whom? In the Kerala society, take for example, black pepper is a plant product. Only, and it is a plant product regularly available in a Kerala society. The moment it reaches Aden, from Aden to, in the Red Sea to Cairo or Alexandria, or in the Persian Gulf area, reaches the eastern, say Constantinople, it then becomes a craze for the consumer demand, not in the local society. It's a pure plant product. The other point is, in the case of luxury items, yes, they will bring enormous profit to the merchants. But how many people will buy the most expensive cotton textiles, say from Surat or from Masulipatnam? Or say the pearls extracted from the area in the Tuticorin? Or say the excellent diamonds from Golconda area. Marco Polo spoke about the wonderful diamond quality under the Kakatiyas. It is actually the bulk product that is carrying the long distance trade for two reasons. Who are the takers even in the distant markets? A bulk commodities have a much larger clientele. Second, the ship only carrying luxuries, which are always portable, small quantity items. The staples are bulk. There, the ship won't simply sail, it would sink if you do not have heavy goods at the bottom of the ship, the hold. So, we are also, in terms of maritime history, constantly looking for the handling of luxuries. Yes, luxuries are important. And take, for example, one luxury items which the Indian powers had to repeatedly bring from abroad, even by overseas network, is the procurement of war horses. India did not have war horses. So they always, the typical route is through the northwest, land route. But from 1000 onwards, the Arabic texts would talk about the horse called Bahari horses, the most expensive. Bahar means the sea, no Bahar. So Bahari, the horses transported across the sea from Aden, from Hormuz, from Kish, right up to the Chola area. And these were in the hands of the Arabic-speaking merchants. only the local handling could be done by local merchants. Like in Tamil Nadu, there are a group of merchants called Kudurai Chetti. Kudur means in Tamil horse. That's why that iron ore project, Kudramukh, a horseshoe-shaped iron mine near Salem. They are called Kudurai Chetti Srishti. Only the Srishtis who are horse dealers of Malay Mandalam, they are from Kerala, but speaking Tamil. What they are doing, when the horse and shiploads come from Aden or Hormuz or from Kish, they unload the cargo. In Kerala society, in those times there is no major political power. These are only swarupams, so small principalities. So the need for war horses, for cavalry, is not much at the point of disembarkation of horses. The demand is in the Nayaka and the Chola area. So these people are the handlers within the country. So they are the, and how do we know? Then once again they are become very rich, successful in doing this inter-Nadu transfer of horses. So they are making charities and building temples and giving money to the temples. That's why they talk of their achievements. We come to know about them in this way. The context is like, so as I once again, luxuries are important, no doubt. And our views are often once again drawing from a European scenario. When European companies came, they had to buy everything from textiles and other things from India. And Europe was hardly giving us anything. So the point was the Dutch had to, the spice trade with their base in Indonesia, they were taking relatively inexpensive cotton cloth from Masulipatam, from Bengal to Southeast Asia to pay the balance for the trade in spice islands. The basic bulk commodity. The cowrie shells, which are regular currency in Bengal, Bihar, Assam, cowrie shells are not indigenous to anywhere in India. They are coming from Maldives in shiploads. Ibn Battuta speaks about them, Ma Huan speaks about them, Tome Pires speaks about them. That shiploads from Maldivian cowries come to Bengal, unload it, and then the Maldivian ships on their return cargo take shiploads of rice, paddy from Bengal, because Maldives is a grain shortage area. Pure bulk commodities are there. So importance of bulk in maritime trade is extremely crucial. Extremely crucial. But thank you for raising this issue.
With this, we come to an end of the question and answer session. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking lecture. As we draw this memorable session to a close, I now invite the Vice President of the Historical Society, Sri Debaduti Banerjee, to deliver the vote of thanks.
As we come to the close of today's program, I take this opportunity to thank our speaker, Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, for his lucid and excellent presentation, and more particularly because, sir, your slides were very clear and informative, and it has helped to keep the audience engaged. Thank you, sir, once again, and we would like you to come and deliver more knowledge to other students in future. I would also like to thank our principal ma'am and our vice principal sir for the encouragement they give to the department and the society. Incidentally, our vice principal sir is also the president of the Historical Society. Now, I also should like to thank our bursar, the Senator Secretary, IQAC Coordinator, and the Teachers Council Secretary for their continued support to the department. Finally, one should not ignore the post holders and the editorial board of the Historical Society, and their untiring work has helped to make the CLIO e-magazine a success, also for the work in the development of the Historical Society.